Welcome to my transparent watercolor paint along Fairport Harbor Light Part 2, the skills exercise. In this video, I'll do 3 simple exercises that will be helpful in accomplishing the subject painting of this paint along Fairport Harbor Light. The first exercise is going to focus on applying a consistent flat wash using one color, and to do so around a simulated building structure, basically a rectangle with a smaller rectangle on top. So just draw a simple shape such as I've drawn with my pencil, and then we're going to draw a simulated horizon line here. So I'm just going to draw a line straight across that's parallel with the tape. So I'm just given the simulation of a lighthouse with a horizon line behind it. The actual shape isn't really that important. So the first thing I'm going to do is mix up the paint. So the objective for this is going to be to apply a consistent wash using one color. I happen to be using a color called peacock blue, which is a Holbein color, but you could use cerulean or manganese or whichever blue you have. And you need to make sure that you mix up enough paint so that you don't run out before you cover your area. You can see I've added quite a bit of water. This is going to be a fluid wash, and I've got a nice sized puddle of paint to work with. So for this exercise, what I want to do is apply this wash from the top of the page to the horizon line, and I want it to be a nice even tone wash. In order to have this flow consistently down the paper and come up with an even wash, I have to maintain a bead of water, and you can see that bead of water along the bottom of the area where I'm putting the wash. And I have to have my work surface at an angle, or I can't do this. You can't do this flat. So you can see that I'm just taking that water, that wash across, and as I take my brush away, I'm loading it up with more paint, and I'm just charging that bead of water with more paint to work with. And here I switched to a flat brush. I started with a round wash brush, but this will give me a cleaner edge around this shape. And as long as I maintain that bead of water, I'm going to be okay. I'm not going to get any backwash. I'm not going to get any hard edges. I'm just going to get a nice, even wash. And you can see that I'm maintaining that bead of water. Now that I have that area covered, I want to make sure I pick up the excess paint, or that's going to start to backwash there. The paper behind it will start to dry, and that bead will start to track back up and cause a blossom. But you can see right now, I'm going to touch up that edge a little bit, but by leading the bead of water down the page, I've been able to apply a nice even wash with one color. You can't do that flat, and you can't do that with a teeny brush. And it's not just brush work. Even though you're applying it with a brush, you're not stroking on the paint with brush strokes. You're putting a brush stroke across the paper and loading up that bead of water and just easing it down the page and letting gravity, you lead it with your brush as you wet the page, then the bead follows, but it stops wherever the paper is dry because there's resistance there. So you have to lead that bead of water down to get that nice even wash. So the second part of this exercise is going to simulate creating water with a horizon line and one that's a bit hazy. Sometimes when you look at a lake such as big as the Great Lakes, when you look in the distance on the horizon, it's not a clean, crisp edge that you see, but a somewhat hazy horizon line. So I'm going to start by working from the bottom up, and gravity's working against me, but that's going to work fine in this application. It's going to give me the result I'm after. So I put some green at the bottom, which is a pyrrole red and sap green mixture, and then I've introduced my blue on the top edge of that. And now I'm loading my brush with clear water, and then I'm going to gradate that wash up a little bit, and I'm going to overlap where I've already painted. And you can see when I do that, it makes that area of overlap a little bit darker than the sky was. And that's going to give the suggestion of this somewhat misty, hazy horizon line in the distance. So now I'm going to take my hairdryer and I'm going to dry this thoroughly, and then I'm going to erase the pencil lines. It's dry, and now I'm taking a kneaded eraser and I'm going to remove the pencil lines. They're not all going to go away, but the majority of it will. As I do this, you can start to see how the washes that I've applied are defining the shape of that would be a building structure, and then creates that variance in value between the sky and the water, but I have that bit of a misty horizon line there in the distance. The second exercise is going to be to give the suggestion of texture using a plastic scraper. To do that, I'm going to apply a generous wash. It's a mixture of burnt sienna, raw sienna, and I'm going to work in a little ultramarine blue in a few areas. I'm not trying to be precise in my application here. This is just experimenting, creating texture, so I'm not trying to paint within any lines. There's no sketch here. I'm just applying a large shape of color. I'm going to use a plastic scraper. This is a plastic scraper that I got as a freebie with a supply order that I got from Cheap Joe's, but you can use a cut up credit card or any similar piece of plastic with a nice clean edge. What's important with this technique is you have to do it when the papers are right, has the right amount of moisture in it. I just made a mark on there with that scraper and it just filled right back in. The problem is it's too wet there. Now it's a little drier over here on this side, and you can see the mark it made. It's not scraping into the paper, it's pushing paint, and you can see on the right there the paper's too wet and the paint flows back in, and it creates, I call it a bruise, but it creates that dark mark on the paper. What I'm after is what's on the left, that light mark where I've pushed the paint away. So what I have to do is wait for the right moisture content in the paper. And the way you can tell is if it's shiny wet, it's going to be too wet. What you're looking for is just a slight sheen in the paper. It can't be so dry that you can't move the paint, but it can't be so wet that the paint flows back in. And that happy medium seems to be when it just has a little bit of a sheen to it. So it's still wet, but it's not dripping wet, and it's not puddled with water on top wet. It's not shiny, but it's not dry either, because you can still move the paint. And as I said, I'm not scratching the paper here. I'm just moving paint with a plastic scraper with the edge of that. Now I'm going to dry this with my hairdryer. But this is an effective technique for creating textures that suggest, as you can see, grass or weeds or something like that. It can work very well in a landscape or any number of other subject matter, but and they don't have to be big, long, grassy-like strokes. You can move the paint in different ways with a piece of plastic, as long as it has a nice hard edge. So that's all there is to this second exercise. The third exercise is going to be using the technique to give the suggestion of trees or branches coming in. So when trees don't have their leaves, but they have a lot of branches, they still project as an image, as a shape. It's like one shape. It's got lots and lots of branches within the shape, but it takes on the characteristics of a semi-transparent, hazy shape. And so that's what I'm simulating here with this wash. I'm giving the suggestion that of the tree mass, the mass of the limbs and the twigs and the sticks. And then I'm going to dry this, and then I'm going to paint over it with a liner brush that gives the impression of branches over top of this shape. Now I'm taking a loaded rigger brush and I'm putting a darker valued mark on top of the wash that I laid down, and I'm making linear marks that give the suggestion of branches, sticks, twigs, and I'm not trying to copy a particular branch out of a photograph or anything. I'm just making marks that resemble tree limbs. And I'm going to use two different size riggers here. This one's a little wider than the other one I'm going to use. Now here I've got my other rigger brush, and it's skinnier than the one I was just using. So here I'm just making marks that resemble twigs and branches. Just a few more marks here, and that's about it. So this is another, again, simple exercise, but you can see different ways to create textures that give the suggestion of grass. You can see how you can put that wash and paint over top of it, and it starts to come together and give the suggestion of trees and trees behind it. And then at the top, a nice even wash. And it's important that you know how to apply a wash such as this and keep it consistent and paint it around objects. And that's the end of the exercise. These are three simple exercises that are helpful in learning some techniques that are utilized in the main painting for this paint along. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of this paint along.